Beautiful. And with that, we'll begin. Thank you, everyone, sincerely for joining, and welcome to today's event, From Nakba to Return, co-hosted by the Green Olive Collective and Zochrot. My name is Erez Bleicher, and I'm the Communications and Membership Director of the Green Olive Collective, a binational advocacy, information, and tour guiding cooperative committed to a democratic future and an end to the ongoing displacement of Palestinians. We provide communities around the world with insights into the apartheid policies of the occupation and the resources to engage in meaningful advocacy in solidarity with Palestinians. Your contributions for today's event will be split between Zochrot and the Green Olive Collective, and go to sustain both our work to fundamentally shift the landscape of discourse around Israel-Palestine, to advance an expansive and robust vision of justice, and to raise local and transnational awareness about the violence of occupation and the ongoing Nakba. We need contributions from you, our wider community, in order to cover the costs of this event and sustain future public initiatives in support of human rights. You can contribute at greenolivetours.com/contributions, which I've just put into the chat. And we will donate 10% of all proceeds from today's event to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which provides healthcare for children in Gaza and is developing a pediatric cardiac surgery program in Khan Yunis in Gaza. And we will also give contributions from this evening to the Human Rights Defenders Fund, HRDF, which provides free legal counsel to human rights defenders engaged in nonviolent opposition to occupation. They provide free legal counsel to many people, including communities in the South Hebron Hills that we work with. And they offer their services as these communities defend their lands and rights in endless court cases. And I can tell you from personal experience that their work is indispensable. Zochrot, our co-host for today's event, is an organization that has worked since 2002 to, in their own words, fracture the walls of denial about the ongoing Nakba, promote historical memory and awareness about the events of 1948 in Israeli society, and promote the right of return for Palestinian refugees. In a political climate in which discussion of the Nakba is often made taboo in Israel, and increasingly censured and actively criminalized by the Israeli government, Zochrot plays a truly pivotal role in the movement to end displacement and in the promotion of human rights. They are tireless in their efforts to promote honestly and sensitively and a redress and a recognition of the origins of violence in this land. Umar Al-Ghubari, who will be our speaker today, who I'm very glad is with us, is a group facilitator, political educator, and lecturer on Palestinian history, identity, Nakba, and return. He works with Zochrot promoting acknowledgement and accountability for the ongoing injustices of the Nakba and a reconceptualization of return as an imperative redress of the Nakba. Omar regularly coordinates and guides tours in depopulated localities and villages inside of Israel. He also edited a collection of vignettes and short fiction stories I adore called Auda, Imagined Testimonies from Possible Futures, imagining a future after Palestinian refugees are allowed to return. Today, Umar will be helping us to do exactly this, to imagine how Palestinian return could look in practice, to imagine a future beyond ongoing displacement, and to focus on the past as a key to a future of collective freedom. I want to actually start today's discussion by just quickly sharing my screen and sharing a quote about the importance of imagination I think is powerful and I found poignant from a recent 972 article. It says the following. Imagination does not merely belong to the realm of fantasy. It's not something unreal that happens when one closes their eyes. On the contrary, it is an action that takes place when one's eyes are open. And skipping to down below, for political theorist Hannah Arendt, imagination is about the relationships that emerge between people who can see each other and envision others' perspectives. The force of imagination, she writes, makes the others present and thus moves in a space that is potentially public, open to all sides. To think with an enlarged mentality means that one trains one's imagination to go visiting. Arendt teaches us that the imagination is not something that appears as a muse to an artist or as a quality we are born with. Rather, it is a capacity that we must train. The imagination is like a muscle in the body, or the ability to write or think, an ongoing process that requires practice. I'm very grateful that Umar is going to join with us today to help us imagine, visit, and practice. Umar, thank you for your time. It's truly appreciated. And the last thing I'll say before passing over to you is that from this moment on in the conversation, feel free to send questions in the chat. At the end of the event today, we'll of course open up to a wider conversation and a question and answer period. So from this moment on, please send any questions you have as Umar proceeds into the chat. Maybe just start your comment in the chat with the word question with a colon or hyphen so that I know I can find it. And then I'll collect the questions you all send during the conversation and integrate them into the question and answer at the end. So thank you, Umar. We're very happy and proud to have you here today, and I'll pass to you. You should be able to unmute yourself. Are you here?
I hear you well. Thank you very much, Erez. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Okay, good evening, and thank you all for attending. Thank you for your introduction. I think before we talk about the imagination and the future and the return, which is very crucial in the context of learning the Nakba, let's go a little bit back to the Nakba land, to the ground, and to learn a little bit about the what Nakba is and what is the wider context that we are acting in order to reach the level of imagining the future and talking about the redress and the justice according to the understanding of the meaning of the Nakba. So allow me please just to share my screen and to try just confirm it to me if it's clear and you see that.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you. So when this gentleman, Constantin Zrek, wrote his first book about the Nakba in Palestine in July 1948, he was located in Syria and he saw the Palestinian refugees reaching the area of South Lebanon and Syria, and he realized that what is going on in Palestine is collective catastrophe, national catastrophe that Palestinian people is facing in those days. And he actually used, he was the first person to use the term Nakba, so that we found some two documents at least of the Israeli army using the same term Nakba when they sent flyers on the Palestinian communities to threat them or to ask them to leave places or to give up. And they used, if you don't want to face Nakba, please do 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can see also that this term Nakba, which is in Arabic catastrophe or big catastrophe, was already in use by this historian and also by the Israeli army, which means that it expressed what happened on the ground. And I want to add that also showed us what the Zionist side had already in their vision and in their the terminology kind of translation of the ideas that they already had on their mind, what will happen to the Palestinian people. So in general, when we talk about the Nakba, we do mention the dry information about expulsion of more than 750,000 Palestinians outside of their towns and villages and homes and homeland. And we talk about the destruction and the erasure of about 600 Palestinian towns and cities and villages. And we talk about preventing their return by the Israeli government. Already in June 1948, the Israeli government had a discussion about what will happen to the Palestinian refugees, and they decided already at that time not to allow them to return. So in this meaning, the Nakba in the surface of the word is clear, maybe for most of the people, but I think in the deep meaning of the Nakba is what is important to understand the real meaning and what happened to the Palestinian people, because it didn't happen according to conditions or circumstances or as a reaction to a political decision or a war or event on the ground. It was already built in the Zionist approach, in the Zionist ideology, and even through this well-known declaration that Mr. Balfour sent to the Zionist leaders in 1917, and already using a terminology that will give us direction what will happen in Palestine in the coming future. And even in this declaration, when let's say it's a British document, even it was written, by the way, basically by the Lord Rothschild himself, and Balfour just edited it. But when we see that already the British government talking about national home for the Jewish people, and they're using the Jewish people despite the fact that only 10%, maybe less than 10% of the population are Jewish in Palestine, and they don't deal with the Palestinians as a nation or as a people. They consider them just non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So we already see this approach, colonial approach, a paternalist approach towards the Palestinians in Palestine, and this will be also taken in their consideration when they will implement the declaration, when they implement the policy of the of creating a Jewish state in Palestine. Some events and some steps that we now know more than 10 years ago or 15 years ago that had been taken by the Israeli side proves that the policy of expulsion of Palestinians did not happen and should not happen only during a war or during clashes or under bombing. We have already some few Israeli documents that were released from the Israeli archives. By the way, more than 90% of the Israeli documents regarding the Palestinian Nakba or regarding 1948 still closed in the Israeli archives. We still don't know everything, but we know enough in order to show the steps or the process of the Nakba, how it was systematic and how it was planned, and of course how it was needed by the Zionists, the Israeli side, in order to expel as much as possible Palestinians outside of their villages and their homeland. Some of the documents showed us that the Israeli army did repeating expulsion, second expulsion for some communities or civilians, or they call them villagers, families that came back to their village or to their homes after the clashes around their village ended. And then the Israeli army sent troops, sent soldiers in order to expel the families again. And it's written clearly in Hebrew in these documents that you see on the screen, that they are talking about villagers or families or farmers, not talking about fighters or armed people. The other thing that the expulsion of Palestinians did not take place only in 1948. It happened before 48, it continued after 48. It didn't happen through or during the war between Israel and the Arab armies, because the war started in May 15th, but expulsions were already in this period of time done in December 1947. The war with the Arab army stopped or finished, ended in May or till November 49, but some Palestinian communities and villages were expelled in 1950s, in 51, some in 1956, some in the 60s. And the policy of expulsion of Palestinian communities still ongoing till today, even inside Israel with the Palestinian Bedouin in the Nakba, in the Negev, or of course in the West Bank, mainly around the villages in South Hebron area, Masafer Yatta, and recently, just in these days, yesterday, 2 days ago, a small community in Ain Samia near Ramallah forced to leave their houses because of the attacks, of the repeating attacks of the settlers in the last weeks and the last months. As I said before, the Israeli decision to prevent the return of the Palestinian refugees and the policy of the Israeli government towards the survivors, the Palestinians that remained in their villages and towns and became citizens of the state of Israel. They didn't live in an Israeli paradise. They lived under military regime for about 18 years. In the big cities, they concentrated the small number of survivors, few hundreds or few thousands among 100,000 people in Jaffa, for example, in a closed area, closed zone that was known as a ghetto. And this photo that you see with the fence is one picture of the ghetto in Jaffa that called Ajami neighborhood, Ajami ghetto. And it was not a slogan, it was, the term ghetto was used officially by the Israeli authorities. Here we can see in the pink paper over here, this is a cover for one of the files that we found in Israeli archive. And it's written in Hebrew, very clearly transferring Arabs to security zones to the ghettos. So I think it's super important to see that this terminology, according to the policy and to the approach and to how the Zionist leaders and the Israeli government saw the Palestinians at that time.
Omar, I just want to jump in and say how important what you're speaking about is. And I think I just want to clarify for people that what you're talking about is the military regime that Palestinian citizens of Israel lived under from 1948 until 1966 through emergency measures that the Israeli government put Palestinians in the internationally recognized borders under a military regime with governorates. I just wanted to shed a little bit more light on that and highlight it, because I think it's so left out of the conversation, in my experience, about democracy, about rights in this context. And to what you're saying, I've had many human rights workers tell me and highlight that what makes a refugee is not alone being forced to flee, but not being allowed to return, being continually displaced. So I just wanted to highlight that and offer a few more words.
Yeah, thank you. It's very important, and I agree with you. This is the what I'm talking about. And by the way, inside Israel, despite the citizenship, as I said, the citizenship didn't give more safe lives for the Palestinians that became citizens of the state. As we see in this document, even in 1950, in one of the meetings of the dominant party at that time in Israel, Mapai party, that composed the government for many years since 1948. And in this discussion, Moshe Dayan, that became defense minister and had different positions in the Israeli leadership, said clearly when they talked about the Palestinians inside Israel, he said that I hope in the coming years there may be another option to make a transfer for those Arabs from the land of Israel. And he talked about 170 Arabs in Israel, which is what became the minority Arabs inside the state of Israel. By the way, 25%, even 30% of the Palestinian citizens in Israel are internal refugees, or IDPs, internal displaced persons. Despite they became part of the state of Israel, citizens in the state of Israel, the government didn't allow them to go back to their original homes or original towns. So when the events of 1948, let's say that the 1948 is the, how you say in English, it's the peak year. It's not the only year of the Nakba steps. But in 1948, the end of the war in 1949, the Zionist and the Israeli side managed to occupy 78% of the Palestinian land. And what remained, the West Bank under the Jordanian rule and Gaza Strip under the Egyptian rule, both were occupied in 1967. We can say that since 1967 till today, the whole Palestinian land is under the control of the Israeli side, and more than occupying the lands, they occupied also the future of the Palestinian people and over the political fate of the all Palestinian people, not only those in the West Bank and those in 1948 or inside the Green Line, inside the state of Israel, but also I would say that Israel controlled the future and the fate of the whole Palestinian refugees outside of Palestine and outside of the state of Israel, in the refugee camps and in the hosting countries like Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and Syria, and based on that decision not to allow them to return. The steps that Israel took after 1948 in order to maintain the control of the Israeli side, of the Zionist side, of the Jewish definition of the state, are also part of the ongoing Nakba. The Nakba didn't end at that time. There are more steps that are needed to be implemented on the ground and in other fields inside the state of Israel in order to strengthen the control of the Israeli side. For example, to take in the first years of the country the British maps and to update them in Hebrew, adding names of new Israeli settlements or towns or kibbutzes that were built after 1948 in these pink colored words that we see in Hebrew. But also they mentioned the erased and the destroyed Palestinian towns also in pink in Hebrew word harus, which means destroyed. So despite the attempt, the effort of the Israeli side to cover or to hide the Nakba, actually in this way they expose the Nakba. They emphasize what they had done. When I see this word harus, for example, here under the village of Sumayriya, I know that the Israelis expelled this community and destroyed this Palestinian house. And this map actually covers the whole country, and we know the names of the hundreds of Palestinian towns through these maps. In the Israeli signs and the Israeli Hebrew maps, we started to see and to read new names, Hebrew names, actually Hebraized names, that were taken from the Jewish history, the old biblical history, or the Zionist movement modern history, or translating the names from Arabic to Hebrew. And sometimes they even took the same word, but they converted that to Hebrew with Hebrew accent. And sometimes they made mistakes. For example, this amazing sign of one of the areas between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, there was a Palestinian village called Nakba. And when they launched the new streets and the new junction in this area, they wanted to name it Anava. It's a Hebrew accent, but it's the same word, the same letters like the Hebrew one, like the Arabic one. The first sign that they put on the right, in your right, you can see in English Anabe with B, but they found the mistake. Then they took the signs very soon, and they put the Hebraized name with Anava. So this just was an accident that they had done in this place. But through these signs, I can understand that this process, brutal process of Hebraizing and Judaizing the landscape and the signs all around the Israeli streets or Israeli towns is kind of proof that they are doing too much in order to hide something. We see still, despite what they try to hide, the ruins of hundreds of Palestinian villages and towns hidden inside the parks and the forests around the country, inside the JNF forest. The JNF, one of the arms, one of the institutions that did a very tough work in order to hide the Palestinian history and the Palestinian towns. In some places, in some cases, you will see, like the case of the village of Lifta in the entrance of Jerusalem, dozens of Palestinian houses. People can use the term abandoned houses, but these houses are part of the proof of the Nakba in the landscape. A little bit more difficult to see the Nakba in the modern big Israeli cities, like in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, after the 1948, it was expanded and covering about 8 Palestinian villages that were expelled, destroyed, and erased. One of the cases, like this 4 photos, I just want to show you one of the neighborhoods of Jaffa. In the top, in your right, you can see the neighborhood of Manshia between Jaffa and Tel Aviv till 1948. Even it was not so important when Nahum Gutman painted this piece in 1935, and he drew the beginning of Tel Aviv, the first houses of Tel Aviv and the old city of Jaffa, but between them, he drew nothing, just empty land. In fact, this neighborhood was existing since 1880 till 1948, but he decided not to show us in his painting. In 1948, the neighborhood was destroyed and expelled. The months after, it was almost destroyed, except few houses. And gradually, during the 60s and the 70s, the municipality of Tel Aviv just took over this neighborhood, and they destroyed the whole houses and built the promenade of Tel Aviv, the Charles Clore Park, as you see it in the photo in your left in the bottom. So this situation is more difficult to find the Nakba, but when you know the information and you go with people to teach them about the landscape, then you can show them the photos and expose the truth beyond the beautiful streets and the beautiful Israeli neighborhoods. There are some examples of abandoned mosques still standing inside the country, but they are not in use as mosques. Some of them are partly destroyed, some of them are closed and no one is allowed to use them. And some of them were converted to synagogues. There are about maybe 20 mosques that have been converted to synagogues and or museums. For example, this beautiful mosque of the village of Al-Khalsa that became the museum of Kiryat Shmona, one of the cities in the north of Israel. Some churches are still on the landscape, like the cases of Ikrit and Kufr Bir'im in the High Galilee, and the village of Al-Bassa under the Israeli town of Shlomi near Akko. Some buildings out of the blue, you can see them in Israeli neighborhoods or in Israeli parks. There were schools of Palestinian villages. The school of Deir Yassin became a branch of the Jewish Orthodox Chabad movement and synagogue, or the school of Beit Nabala became an office for the JNF. If we talked about 600 Palestinian villages and towns, all of them had cemeteries, graveyards. We should ask, where are these graveyards? Unfortunately, many of them were destroyed totally and buried under Israeli towns or institutions, I will show, or are still in the area with very bad conditions, desecrated, open, not protected, vandalized in different ways. And sometimes, as I said, very surprising, Israeli institutions were built on cemeteries. On your left, these buildings were built in the last decade as part of the University of Tel Aviv on the cemetery of Sheikh Mwannis village, that the university was built on their houses, but recently they built also these buildings on the cemetery, knowing that they are doing that on the cemetery. In your right, this is an institution that actually now it's finished. It was launched 6 months ago in West Jerusalem, in the neighborhood of Mamila in Hebrew, and it was also built on Palestinian cemetery, very close to the Independence Park that also was built on that cemetery. And this museum is, and this institution is the Museum for Tolerance. So ironic, so painful, but this is the truth. In the other side, Nakba ruins are not only destruction. In the big cities, in the big Palestinian cities, there are some Palestinian villas, Palestinian houses, Palestinian streets, and sometimes Palestinian neighborhoods are still existing. Of course, settled by Jewish families and by Israeli decisions, but not Palestinian families. Like these examples from the house of Arif Al-Arif in Be'er Sheva, Bir al-Saba city, you're right in the bottom. The villa with many Israeli flags, which is actually Harun al-Rashid villa, belongs to Sharat family in West Jerusalem in Talbiya neighborhood. And these big houses, big buildings belong to Khartabil family that became refugees in Lebanon in Tiberias. They are now still existing in Tiberias. So in this conditions of looking for the proofs and the evidences of the Nakba, Zochrot became as an organization trying to educate and to teach the Israeli Jewish society about the hidden history that they don't see or they cannot see on the landscape. And more than that, they don't learn that in the Israeli schools. So we saw our role is to expose the Nakba for the Israeli society, the Hebrew speakers mainly, and we started to collect testimonies from Palestinian refugees or internally displaced families, We went with them to their original village. Even it was destroyed, they could explain to us how the village looked like and what was destroyed and where their houses were, where the schools, where were the mosques, and other things that can help us in order to give the picture how the destruction was wide. We documented these testimonies and other information about these villages, and we published booklets that mainly in Hebrew to document these places, and this became the only resource in Hebrew that Israelis can read easily about these Palestinian erased villages. We wrote till now 65 different booklets talking about 65 different destroyed towns and villages. The tools that we organize, we go and we feel and we touch the area of the destroyed town, and this became one of the most important tools to teach people about the erased history. And of course, beyond our educational projects, we have also our political say and political demand. We put signs with the original name of the place, and you can imagine that these signs will not last many days in the area. Someone will come and uproot these signs. All the signs that we put, and we put hundreds of them, were uprooted by people that don't like the fact that someone reminds them the original name of the place. We also published maps that reclaim the Palestinian map before the destruction, reclaim the names of the destroyed Palestinian towns. The one on your left, we call it the Nakba map. It includes 600 names of 600 destroyed Palestinian towns. They are all colored in red, and the Israelis can read and can know the name of the destroyed Palestinian town and how close it is to his current house, to his current town and city. In your right, you'll see the map of Tel Aviv, and all these yellow or orange spots are actually original Palestinian villages that all of them had been erased and destroyed. And finally, regarding our projects, I think this app is one of the most important projects that we did in the last years. We started maybe 10 years ago with the first app that's called iNakba, and it was updated to iReturn. The iReturn app for smartphones shows us the map of the destroyed Palestinian towns in 3 languages, Arabic, Hebrew, and English. And you can pick anyone that you need or look for anyone that you want to learn about, and you will get information about it. And this is not the only thing that this app helps you to learn. It could be used as a GPS. You ask the app to take you to the village that you look for. This is the only app that takes you to a place with no address. It's not existing. It's not real place. It's real, but you see you reach the location as it was marked in the British maps before the destruction. When you go there, you need to have kind of dialogue with the landscape to ask, where is this village? Where is this town? And I think this is the uniqueness of this app that bring people to have kind of interactive relation with the location that is not existing on the ground in these days. So I think that this app that became iReturn, not only iNakba, bring me to the point that we started to think about the return, about the future, about the solution, about the redress, not only talking about the past and about the history. It's very important. Of course, we cannot deal with the future without understanding what really happened in the past and during the Nakba and during the ongoing Nakba. So I think even in our tools, we started to look at the landscape not only as a place of sorrow, as a place of disaster, but also as a place with potential justice or potential space for return, that people or the original residents of this area can think about their future, including their return in this place. What we suggested to do to ourselves and to many workshops that we conducted regarding these places is to imagine the future, to try to plan and to think how the landscape, how this area, how the whole Palestinian area, how the Israeli and the Palestinians will live in the future, including the justice and including the return. First of all, we thought that the imagination by itself is a political action. It's a political project. Just to imagine the future, not only to talk about the past, is by itself is valuable and bring people to different stage of realizing the landscape, not only to react against injustice or crimes or talking about proofs from the past, but also to design the future and to design the life of the people. And when you invite people to talk about the future, you actually deliver to them kind of responsibility. You give them responsibility in order to design and to think about their future. In this practice and this exercise of imagination is important because it faces very actual and practical aspects of the return, very important questions that usually we don't ask, we don't discuss, because as Aris said in the beginning, it's taboo here, of course, inside Israel to talk about return. This exercise is part of giving hope to the people, responsibility to their future, and to avoid the psychological obstacles like the fear from return. To ask the question, what will happen to me as Palestinian and as Jewish? What will happen to me if the return will be implemented? What and how the landscape will look like? What kind of regime I want to see in the country? What kind of political entity I want to see? How justice will look like? How equality will be done? What is the meaning of democracy? Do we have now democracy, or this is kind of proof that we don't? So I think all these questions and discussions are very crucial in order to take the people from being stuck in the discussion or in the debate about the demographic threat, or about even the Palestinian fantasy to return to the paradise of Palestine. I think this is very important because even the Palestinians don't ask the real questions about the practical return. How do, as Palestinians, we see the future of this landscape and the return? Because the return will be to a different Palestine. It's not the same Palestine that people are forced to leave in 1948. 75 years of colonization need or demand us to be creative and to think about the options of implementing the return without causing a new expulsion, even for the colonizers and the occupiers. We need to think about decolonization of our mind and decolonization of the land, but to offer a kind of a shared future or a democratic future or equal future for all the people that decide or choose to live in this place. So I think these are workshops that we started firstly with young displaced people, or what we call the third or the fourth generation of the displaced Palestinian families. And they started for the first time to think about the future of their village or their future in their village, and to imagine how it will look like. So I will show you just 3 or 4 examples of some images that these groups and these youth drawed. Of course, they have also text and questions regarding many things, many aspects of the return and the life after return, that how they said, we never thought about that. We all the time demand our return, but it looked for us kind of dream. What we try to do is to take this dream down to earth and to try to think about it as a feasible, applicable, achievable goal, not just a fantasy that people don't feel that it will be implemented. And I think these questions started to influence more and more organizations and groups, and now we have kind of dozens of models of planned or built Palestinian towns and villages, at least in the imagination of these groups. So I think I will stop here because the time is running, and is it okay?
Thanks. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Truly, thanks to you and thanks to Zochrot. I hadn't seen those plans and models that you all have drawn up before. So incredible and so powerful. And I think especially, again, the ways that you and Zochrot and others are both reclaiming the landscape itself, reclaiming the historical record and the historical archive, but also very powerfully, as you've put it, reclaiming the imagination itself as a territory for sovereignty, for justice, for a future that feels tangible. And the questions you pose are so incredible. What I'm thinking about from your conversation, what sensations, what sense will accompany return? What will people experience? To actually put yourself in that place is incredible. We do have time for some questions, and I'm very glad to say there's already been quite a lively engagement with your presentation in the comments and in the chat. So we'll bring that to you now as well. The first question is not a specific person's question, but going back to the start of your discussion with us, you talked about 1917 and Balfour, and several people asked questions about the relationship between the Zionist establishment and the British during the British Mandate. Also, what was the Palestinian relationship to the British? And I guess I just wanted to ask you to quickly, because there are other questions, comment on that, and maybe it also helps to frame what's happening now in the ongoing Nakba within a larger history of colonialism and European intervention.
Well, yeah, I'm not expert of the relationship between or the history of Britain, but of course I can say shortly that the Palestinians look at the British as a colonial power that has no right to settle Palestine, to occupy Palestine, or of course not to promise anyone to have a state in Palestine. Usually we say that one side that doesn't have promised another side that doesn't deserve, or something. So because the British was part of the colonial powers at that time, and of course the Zionist movement relationship with the British. Even it became complicated during the British mandate because we had different Zionist organizations, more extreme, less extreme. But in general, of course, the Zionist side had a very good and strong contact with the British government from the beginning, even before the 1917 declaration. The relationship between the Lord Rothschild and the James Balfour was strong before that promise. And as I said, the declaration by itself and the promise to facilitate creating Jewish state, it was very clear. So the relationship between both sides were very strong, and both came from the same culture, from the same area, from Europe, and they had in common many things at that time.
Thanks, Umar. So much more to say, of course. And I think important to situate everything that continues to be happening here within a larger history of European nationalism and intervention into the region. I want to quickly, to make sure there's time, shift to a question that was asked by Annie O'Gara. My apologies for potentially mispronouncing the name, about the Jewish National Fund and commenting about how it purports to be an ethical environmental organization. Annie, if you're here, actually, I'm going to invite you to ask yourself if you want to pose the question to Umar. I'll ask you to unmute, and if for whatever reason you can't, I'll ask for you. But if you're here, chime in.
I am here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It was an incredibly interesting talk, Omar, and as always, I learned a lot from you. You mentioned the JNF, and Najwan has kindly put information in the chat, but I'm interested in every aspect of the JNF, but in particular, its disreputable reputation as a green organisation with observer status at the COP, the Conference of Parties. Could you briefly just summarise the environmental damage that the JNF has caused across historic Palestine?
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. It's a wide topic. Saying that the JNF was established in 1900, so yeah, 1900 or maybe 01, and it, the policy is to save or to save back the Jewish land, the Jewish people land. Until today, they have on their website the clear racist approach that this land belongs only to Jews. Even people inside Israel, like me, that they are not Jews, they are not allowed to get any benefit from the JNF lands. In these days, we can say that 13% of the land of Israel is under the control of the JNF. The first damage was using the green trees as soldiers in order to hide the Palestinian villages and to prevent the Palestinian return, the Palestinian refugees return. So the first damage is against a human being. It's taking part in the violation of the rights of the refugees in order not to allow them to get back. During the years, we saw that the trees that the JNF usually planted in Palestine were trees that were brought from Europe. So they used the trees as a tool of colonialism. They are actually colonial trees. They are not green trees or only natural or beautiful trees. But these kinds of trees doesn't fit the climate and the weather in Palestine, in the Middle East. First of all, the nails of the leaves of these trees has a kind of poison. The material of these trees kills the kinds of plants and even kind of animals, insects, we say in English, that disappeared during the 7 decades or more from the area. These trees are very we call it burning or fired. If a fire will take place in these forests, it will be more difficult to control them. And it happened here inside Israel with 2 or 3 big fires that took place in mountains and forests of the JNF, and it took days to control that. By the way, it was amazing when the fire was relaxing or taken down. We saw the ruins of the Palestinian terraces and Palestinian houses among the burned trees. It was really amazing view. 70 years after that, the JNF realized that these trees doesn't belong to this place. In the replanting new forests, they try to plant different kinds of trees are similar to the original or indigenous trees, like the oak trees or carob trees.
Thanks, Umar. And to your point, I've spoken to people from the unrecognized Bedouin villages in the Nakba, in the Negev desert, who have said things to me like, I relate to the trees as an extension of the military. Each tree is almost like a soldier. And to understand this environmental organization within a larger political project is so important. There's so many more questions to ask, but I guess I want to ask you to end, because we must, by commenting about what, alongside what you've already mentioned, is exciting for you right now and to Zochrot around imagination and thinking about the future. Is there projects you're collaborating with other organizations? Do you see other important shifts around imagination in the world that are intriguing for you and you want to tap into? I guess I'd just like you to close with any thoughts and final words you might have.
Well, I think this switch that we did when we started to think about the practical aspects of return and the questions about the future, including return, was very, very important process of learning, self-learning. First of all, we did that by ourselves. We had contact with Palestinian organizations in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, and other researchers all over. We made study tours in South Africa and in former Yugoslavia, and we wrote documents. You are invited to read these documents in our website. Cape Town document and Haifa document, Jaffa document are available also in English. We put just a kind of principles, how we see the future after return. I had to admit that what moved me in this experience was the meeting with Palestinian refugees in the Palestinian refugee camps in the West Bank. All of them were younger than me, of course, and I was surprised and excited to see how much they are open-minded when they think about return. And when they face these questions for the first time, this is, of course, exciting that when you talk with Palestinian refugees, they said, well, we didn't think about return in this meaning, in this depth. So I think the questions of how they see their life in the future, different than the life of their grandparents and grandmothers, is very, very significant way of thinking. When they describe the village in the future and how much it is different than the village from the past, but at the same time they insisted to make kind of memorial spot in the village, or the center of the village should be connected to the history or to the expulsion or to their grandfather's life, but the real life should be according to the modern life. They didn't look for farm to work in. Some of them did, but the majority, they work in high tech and they work in different modern professions. So they ask the questions how the life will be for them according to their needs and to their modern visions. One of the questions that we faced and we didn't think about it's about the place. How much space do we have for building or rebuilding Palestinian towns and villages? Taking into consideration that the number of the people of Palestine in general, and of course of the refugees, was increased 10 times since 1948, even more. So the village that was expelled with 1,000 people in 1948, you should think about the return of 10,000 people in this time. So how the return will look like, how the village will be designed, how the people will live. It will be all of them living in villas or in high buildings. And there were in such area dozens of Palestinian villages close to each other. In normal situation, they will be expanding and reaching each other and creating one big town or city or community. So some of these young groups thought about creating a shared city for about 20 villages, and it will be good enough for them to implement the return, for example. So they were creative in giving ideas that I didn't expect to hear from them. One of them said that this will finish. There are many ideas, but this idea was fantastic. And some of them said, I need to hear the acknowledgement of my return, and I will think about things to do in my homeland. I don't want to live necessarily in my original village, but if after the acknowledgement that that was my village, I will live in Jaffa. I love the city of Jaffa. I will live in Jaffa, not in my original village. Or for example, in the villages or the town that Israel built already big cities or universities. No one of the Palestinian refugees that I talked with them thought about destroying the University of Tel Aviv in order to build the Sheikh Moniz village. They didn't think about destruction. They thought about building more than destruction, and think this is amazing.
Yeah, wow. And also just, I mean, full credit to you and Zochrot for creating the space where we all can collectively take our cues and leadership from the young and from the youth, imagining the future that right now sometimes feels so hard to grasp. And you all are creating the space for all of us to feel tangibly. So thank you really so much for that, and also for this event where we could do exactly that. As I mentioned at the start of our time, we depend on contributions from you, our wider community, to cover the costs of our events, to sustain our work to combat the violence of occupation and shift the fundamental discourse around Israel-Palestine towards equality, justice, and democracy. Once more, you can contribute at greenolivetours.com/contributions, and all contributions for today's event will be split to support the work of Zochrot and of the Green Olive Collective. Your support will sustain future advocacy initiatives and the work of our incredible guides and Zochrot's incredible guides, our guides in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and throughout the occupied West Bank, who many of you here have also met through Green Olive or on Zochrot tours you've been on, and are every day bringing international visitors to occupied territory to see the reality with their own eyes, bear witness and hear testimony from Palestinians, and develop relationships with communities living under occupation, whose voices they can amplify around the world. Your contributions will help us to create strategic advocacy resources, media trainings, informational films and primers, and other publications and materials whose aim is to expose the international community to the reality on the ground and to amplify the voices of human rights defenders. Very lastly, at Green Olive, we're now in the middle of a membership drive and public awareness campaign designed to empower people around the world to act for justice. This can provide you an opportunity to join a global community of conscience and take part in activities advancing democracy and human rights. If you'd like to become a member, I also shared the link in the chat at members.greenolivecollective.com. As we mark the 75th anniversary of the Nakba this month, and the 56th anniversary of the occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza in June, we all are saying, I know along with Zochrot, no more anniversaries. We invite you to create a future in which we no longer have to mark such dates. And if we all do our part, we won't have to each year call attention to the sorrow and mourning, but to a proactive future of possibility and imagination, as Umar has helped us grasp and come in connection with tonight. Today, sorry, I know many people are everywhere around the world in the different time zones. In any case, stay tuned for updates and for upcoming events from Green Olive and Zochrot. And thanks everyone for joining, and truly have lovely days. We're excited to be in connection with you all in the future. Umar, thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'm excited to be in touch. I'm sure we'll all talk very soon. Thank you all.